Hey guys, Spirit of the Law here. Age of Empires 3 might be one of the best games I've ever seen for crazy cheat code units. And in this video, I want to show you what they look like in Definitive Edition and rank them according to tiers. Before we get to that though, to start off with the more general and basic cheat codes, you can press enter and type in give me liberty or give me coin, medium rare please, and censored in angle brackets for 10,000 of a specific resource. Trade please, spelled in that specific way, also gives export at the consulate. You can also just use a whole lot of love, and couldn't we all use a bit of that now and then, to get 10,000 of all the resources mentioned at once. In fact, of those 5, you only ever really need that one. There's also Nova and Orion for extra experience in case you want to unlock a bunch of shipments at once. You can reveal the map with X marks the spot, though notice it keeps Fog of War in effect, though as far as I know that can't be removed entirely. If you really want, you can also fatten all of the herdable animals on the map. With the code, a recent study indicated that 100% of herdables are obese. It's also sometimes useful to speed up your buildings, your villagers, and your shipments, and for that you can use speed always wins, which is the equivalent of Aegis in Age of Empires 2. Similarly, you can toggle it on and off using the same code, and keep in mind this affects all players, including your opponent as well. Another toggleable cheat code, So Good, adds text for unit and building kills to say what type of unit they were beaten by. This is if even more text appearing in the middle of a fight is something that you're looking for. If all of those cheat codes aren't enough and you're still losing, the code This Is Too Hard lets you automatically win any single player game. So far though, most of these still involve having to play the game somewhat legitimately, which isn't really in the spirit of cheat codes. Instead, if what you want is a way to repay the audacity of the AI in insulting you or for simply beating you, well, then let's look at the cheat code units. The first is Tuck Tuck Tuck, which gives you the Tommynator monster truck. All enemy units, buildings, and even trees around it are immediately destroyed when it comes close enough. It has 60,000 HP, deals 1200 attack within 6 tiles, and resists 90% of melee damage done to it. Even one of these is an efficient way to demolish any city and wipe out an AI that's been giving you a bit too much attitude. Right out of the gate, this is S tier, ladies and gentlemen. The next unit is unlocked by You Gotta Make Do With What You Got, and is the Mediocre Bombard. Don't let the name fool you, there's nothing mediocre about it. It's a faster firing version of the Bombard with greater splash damage and fires capybaras. There's something pretty satisfying about the capybaras peacefully floating down from the sky and watching the enemy units ragdoll into the distance. That said, they are less overkill than the Tommynator monster truck, and while clearly are still broken, they can be beaten. They get some style points, but I'm still gonna say they're a B tier. They're just a bit too squishy to reliably end the game with a small group on their own. Next, maybe the most iconic is George Crushington with the code Where's That Axe? If you thought the monster truck's 60,000 HP was a lot, how about 1 million? He also has 2 ways he can fight. The regular way where he attacks 1 unit at a time, or you can turn on trample mode where he'll trample several units in the immediate area. Clearly, he's a pretty patriotic guy, so naturally both his cost is a reference to the United States Independence Day, and he also plays a bit of the anthem when you create him. I'd say he's A tier, even though arguably he has less destructive power than anything we've seen so far, but I think riding on style points and attitude get him there. Now that's all great for Americans, but what about Canadians? Well, luckily we're covered too with O Canada 2005. Not only are they patriotic Canadian bears, but also flying ones with capes and hats. Maybe somewhat surprisingly, they fire lasers out of their eyes, leading me to believe these are in fact Kryptonian bears. Now they're not as overpowered as some of the others we've seen so far because they don't do area damage, but they're still another example of where bears beats Battlestar Galactica. For me, they're a pretty clear B tier, as you actually need a lot of them to push the AI, and despite the swelling of patriotism I feel when seeing that flag, I can't go any higher. The next one is unlocked with Don't Kick the Pitbull and is a Learicorn. You know, a man in a tuxedo riding a unicorn. Now its stats aren't that earth-shattering, and in fact it gives your opponent 15,000 XP for every one of them they can bring down. Honestly, you're basically just gifting your opponent XP, but if the battlefield being covered by sparkles is an absolute must for you, then it's probably worth it. The fact you might actually be feeding XP to your opponent and making them stronger with this unit isn't something I can just overlook, so this is a D tier unit, though like I said, S tier for generating sparkles. The next is We Love Fluffy, but don't let the name fool you, this dog is anything but fluffy, and even the game's description is that it's the world's ugliest dog. Again, you have to be careful with this one since you're giving 15,000 XP to your opponent for each one you lose, and they only have 600 HP. Fluffy also can't attack buildings, so there's definitely some trade-offs. This one's tough because it can be effective, but I think it fits best in C tier between the Lazerbear and the Learicorn. Moving on, we have Wavu Vol 2 giving a Flying Purple Tapir trailed by rainbows. I'm not really sure what the point of this one is. It's not fast enough or have enough line of sight to scout, and it also can't attack. The airplane sound effects that it gives off also get old faster than you might think. As far as I can tell, all it does is leave rainbow-colored chemtrails around the map, so at least it has that going for it. Unfortunately, they don't seem to pacify the enemy though, and if anything, just make them angrier. For a tier list like this where we're looking at strength, it's a bit of a flop and another D tier. Honestly, if there was an F tier, that's where I'd put them. If they were better at scouting or could pacify nearby enemies, then maybe we'd have something. But let's get back to some winners. The code WEO gives you the BigAndy monster truck. Basically, it's about the same as the Tommynator we already saw, but a bit faster and a bit larger trample area with slightly less attack. Functionally, they're about equally effective at steamrolling an enemy, and it just comes to whether you prefer the AI's nightmares be filled with the color red or the color blue. Obviously, this is another in S tier, but if we're splitting hairs, I think it might actually be slightly better because of the speed and larger damage area around it. Now, I hear what you're saying. You don't like red or blue trucks. Well, you're still in luck. The code ding 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 gives you an ice cream truck version of the same thing. Not only does it have all of the normal stats you expect from a monster truck, but also with the twist of being able to create new villagers. The villagers disappear after a while and there is a cooldown on the ability, but again you can make the argument this is the best monster truck out of the cohort. Again, clearly they're S tier. And finally, the last cheat code unit is the Flaming Hot Dog Cart, unlocked by the code Mustard, Relish, and Burning Oil. Now at this point, you might be trained to expect anything that looks weak and mundane is actually going to be really good. And while yes, they do have built-in flamethrowers, they're street vendors, not professional soldiers, so don't expect too much. They do alright for themselves, but like some of the other non-monster truck units, they're a bit weak to artillery and ranged attacks. I'd say they're another C tier. That puts them in the same spot as Fluffy, which might seem weird because Fluffy has double the HP and 53 times the attack, but Fluffy also gives the enemy 15,000 XP when it dies, and the Flaming Hot Dog Cart only gives 34 XP. The fact you're not giving your opponent 10 free shipments every time you lose a unit is a positive in my book. So those are my rankings of the Age of Empires 3 Definitive Edition cheat code units. I hope you enjoyed it, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.